Okay, we're having a little bit of, or I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties today. My light keeps going out. It has a short in it, and sometimes it comes on and sometimes it doesn't. So I might just have to do it like, what's his name? Vincent Price style today, and be a little spooky and creepy. I might be able to maybe get my phone to give light. I don't know. Until I can get out and find another solution, y'all may have to tolerate me in the shadows. Y'all might prefer that, actually. Okay, let me find the light. How do you turn your phone light on? Oh, light. Okay. Ooh, look at that. Oh, wow. I like that. Does that help at all? Maybe. It's bright. I don't think it makes much difference. We'll just do without the light today. I'm sure y'all could tolerate me. Um, so today, well, my voice is really, maybe I'm doing too much streaming, and it's a sign. So anyway, today, Billy the Kid, the documentary on the autistic, gifted, twice exceptional young gentleman from Maine, is tonight at 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific. So y'all can Gmail me for a link, Primal Hex, or find me on Twitter, and I'll get you a link to that. And then we're having our gifted, twice exceptional Zoom tomorrow, where we'll talk more about all those kind of topics. Saturday, after the P.F. Jung show, which is, I think it starts at 9 Central and goes to about 12:30ish. We're gonna watch Fight Club. Some of the boys are getting together, and don't talk about it, but we're gonna watch it. And so, if you want the link for that, just contact me too, and come and watch Fight Club with us. I'm gonna try to start doing like maybe a men's movie every weekend, in addition to the other movies we're doing for the other groups. And we're going to start with Fight Club this weekend. So that's all the stuff that's going on. Sunday, I have Steve Jarrett Jordan coming on to talk about men's mental health. Very excited about that. And today, I said yesterday I was going to do a topic at some point on status and social roles. And I figured, why not today? The problem is I may not be the best person for this topic because I don't really notice status or social roles, but maybe my my lack, the insight, maybe there's some insight that could come from my lack of awareness. Maybe that'll be instructional. These video essays, kind of, I guess what you call them, it's not really information I'm trying to present, like educational. It's more in the sense of Montaigne's essays, just trials and attempts to work out my thoughts on different topics and subjects, drawing on my own experience. And so that's really what these are. I'm going to find out as much of what I know about status and social roles today as you will, because I'm going to be working it out as we talk. Now, I did get ChatGPT to help me with it a bit, and make a few prompts around it. I think the best place to start is Eric Erickson's, my voice is really starting to bother me, is Eric Erickson's concept of role confusion, because that's definitely something I experience a lot as an autistic person, and it's not limited to autistic people. In his theory, it's one of the stages of development, about somewhere in adolescence, maybe high schoolish, where you start to kind of find your place in the larger social milieu and take on different roles, which I don't really know what roles are. I know specific roles. If I have a certain job, I know what my role is in that job. If I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, I know what my character's role is in the party. If I'm playing a board game, I know what my role is in the game. Or if I'm, say, teaching in the classroom, I know my role is the teacher and the kids have a specific role. So if they're really obvious and delineated, I can usually figure out, and it's my own interpretation of what that role is. There's not really like someone can't give me a template on here's your role and all the things you have to do in it. They can kind of sketch out the role, and then I'm going to creatively interpret what that role means for me and what I think I should be doing with it. So sometimes that can clash with the role expectations of what other people might have for the role I'm in. But role confusion, this is from ChatGPT, also known as identity diffusion or identity confusion. So he's talking about the adolescent stage, but it also applies to it can happen at any stage of life. They struggle to develop a sense of self and establish a consistent and cohesive identity. Now, to the extent that a sense of self, again, whatever that is, comes from, in the sense that it's relational and it comes from your intersubjective interaction with other humans in a social world, I can see where role confusion can cause identity confusion or maybe a nebulous sense of self. To the extent that your sense of identity depends on internal values, independent of any kind of social validation, affirmation, or even social context, that's a little different than the sense of self, like disruption they're talking about in role confusion. A lot of my sense of self, and remember, ought, the prefix ought, A-U-T, means self. So a lot of my sense of self comes from deeply held internal experiences, perceptions, values, cognitive values, aesthetic values that are kind of either hardwired into me or were acquired at an early enough age to behave as though they're hardwired into me. Either way, they're deeply held. That's important. They're not likely to change, or if they do change, they change through a very involved and long-term process. Although I guess sometimes the change can happen through abrupt crises. But the point is, the sense of, like, I guess there's two senses of self, at least potentially. And for me, mine tends to come from more an innate or internal sense of self. And I'm very big on the concept of the authentic self or the deep self. Hey, Dolbez, you just finished your exam. Oh, wow, cool. If you want to come on and talk, you're welcome to. I hope you did well on your exam. Is this the end of the, what do you have, semesters, quarters, school year for you? Good to see you. I'm talking about role confusion and social roles and social status. I'm trying to kind of work my way through it conceptually. So you have a sense of self that can be more innate or internal and kind of independent. Like gay is a good example. Like I was gay independently of any social interaction. I knew I was gay very early, around puberty, like age 11. He says, I can join, just waiting. Okay, I'll talk a little bit and then I'll send you a link and maybe you can fill in with your thoughts. And regardless of the social interactions, like the social interactions could have been anything and it would not have changed my sense of my own sexuality. That was independent of any kind of role, any kind of social determinism. But then there's also the sense of self that I guess you get from being in certain roles. Like mothers may draw a sense of self from being a mother or a wife, a husband, a professional role, a role in a community organization, perhaps. So I think there's at least, and this kind of would accord with what Dabrowski says as well. There's kind of two factors, or at least two factors, that can play into our sense of self or identity. There's the internal first factor, the innate, and then there's the external second factor, the environmental or social. He goes on to say that adolescents may experiment with different identities, behaviors, social groups in an attempt to find a sense of belonging and purpose. Yes, and I think that's important. And I've talked many times about the power of a healthy, authentic community on mental health, one where you can be your authentic self. But I think that's a little different than perhaps sense of identity, although it could maybe influence or feed into our sense of identity. They may also feel pressure to conform to societal expectations or the expectations of others, leading to a conflict between their own desires and external demands. This internal conflict and uncertainty can contribute to feelings of anxiety, frustration, and low self-esteem. Dabrowski would say that's a sign of positive maladjustment. These are dynamisms and psychoneuroses, and they are the first step in a process of personal growth to find your own authentic values that are in conflict and to clarify those for yourself and be more confirmed in them, and b an environment where they don't conflict and that you are more adjusted to. So I have a different take on this, but the part about societal expectations, that's the part that's invisible to me, unless people go out of their way to like verbally articulate the expectations, and I can somehow comprehend them and make sense of them and internalize them. Okay, I'm gonna go through talk a little bit more and kind of set it up, and then I'll send you a link. I'll hit you on Discord maybe with a link. Let me. So I wanted to tie this into status too, because I think what underlines a lot of these roles, especially if they're roles to me, are in relation to other roles or other people in roles. And to the extent that that relation has a hierarchical element to it at all, you're going to run into the concept of status. And Jordan Peterson kind of talks about this with the lobster, and we're primates and we're wired for status. That's why I'm not sure. I'm supposed to do a stream at some point, maybe this weekend, with Zachary. And if there's any women or feminists that want to join, we're kind of looking to make it a panel and have both genders represented, but on egalitarianism. And if it's truly possible in our current state of evolution, or perhaps at all. And so to the extent that you have a power differential in any of these roles, you're going to have, to me, and this is just roughly, status is, if you're lower status, there's going to be some element of fear or caution or alertness. And if you're higher status, you're going to have a different set of, maybe like a different emotional palette. I'm not sure that people, and I guess this is what some people could call privilege, but people with status or privilege may not always be aware that they have it, because they're not feeling the emotions that the people that don't have it are feeling around the people that do. And I don't feel a lot of fear. I'm not really conscious of status. So if you put me around someone that is nominally of high status than me, I may not even notice. Like if you put me, like Biden's the president, if you put me with Biden, he's just some old guy to me. He doesn't emotionally read as anybody that has more status than me. And I've talked before, I think some of that's Cajun cultural thing, and some of that's the autism. But I don't really, it's very rare that I feel like someone has actual status, or that I detect, oh, this is a person that has more status than me. I should approach them differently, or have a different interaction with them than I would with other people. Now, there are people that I think are more creative than me in certain areas that I really admire and look up to, are more intelligent than me in certain areas that I can learn from, like a mentorship role. But I don't really feel a status or power difference. Like I'm not scared of a mentor, and I'm not scared of somebody who's more skilled than me in certain areas. It's more of I can learn from them. I can aspire to some of their abilities if I think I have the capability of acquiring them. Sometimes I don't. Like, I'm never gonna play electric guitar as much as I'd like to with the dyspraxia. So I could admire a guitarist without being scared of them, envious of them, or feeling like I want to acquire their ability somehow. And so I guess that's a form of status, but it's not the kind that I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but Nietzsche talks about slave morality and master morality, and the genealogy of morals is kind of a very acute, thorough analysis of, I think, extremes of status or perception of status, because so much of status revolves around perception. The people with status perceive that they are of a higher status than others if they're aware of it, and the people without status have some perception of those that do, that maybe causes the fear or anxiety. And so I think regardless of what the roles are, underpinning all of them, if they're, like I said, if there any kind of hierarchical element to them at all, is going to be this kind of differential that you can map out from role to role. And I'm not sure what I even wanted to say about this, but I generated some questions from ChatGPT, and in fact, let me glance at them, because maybe it's something that we can go through with Dolbez. What are social roles? How do they shape our identities and behavior? Now, I will give one example, and I've given it before, but it was one I was recently conscious of. I was a participant in this particular community. I was just Jeff, just an ordinary participant, one among equals, and I was asked to help moderate. So I was given the title of moderator, and it puts a little label. This is an online group, so it puts a little tag next to your name that says moderator. And just the act of having me take on the moderator role started to shift how I thought about the group. And I was on a Zoom one day, and there was an interaction on the Zoom that conflicted with my personal values, Jeff, just me, the community member, the participant. And ordinarily, if that were my only role, and I guess that is a role, I would speak back and speak out and voice my objection, or we'd start some kind of dialogue around the topic. But because I was conscious of also being in this role of moderator, I started to get conflicted, and I wanted to speak back, but then I felt like I had this additional duty to the group, and keeping a good face for the group and keeping group harmony, and it clashed with my ability to kind of confront what the person was saying and start a back and forth about it, which would maybe have been counter to the purpose of moderator, of keeping the group cohesive and harmonious. And it really, really threw me into, I guess it was a form of role confusion. I really struggled with being even conscious that I was in a role, because I'm often not, and then aware of the impact that role was having on this other role, which I wasn't even aware was a role, and that's just community member or me. And so I imagine that people that take on different roles, and growing up, I was an altar boy, and that was kind of a role. So I had a specific role within the Catholic Church that I was conscious of. I was a Boy Scout, and you kind of have roles there. You have Scoutmaster, and as you move up the levels, you kind of shift into not really roles, but different. I mean, I guess they're kind of roles. They're ranks, identities. Like your identity as a Cub Scout is different than your identity as I think Star was as high as I went, Star Scout. I was also president of the 4-H club. And that was a very specific role where I was very conscious I had additional duties and responsibilities. So if you're put into different roles at a young age, or whatever age, really, I'm starting to understand how the duties, demands, and expectations of specific roles can interact and influence the previous roles that you bring to them, even if that role is just a member of a community or a group, which is kind of fuzzy, nebulous role, but they're still. I guess what defines a role would be the question. Um, I think roles are relation. It's like your function or set of parameters in relation to another person's agreed upon or laid out set of parameters, and like we said, that can feed into your identity. If it's not innate, it can feed into your identity from the. We acquire some of our identity through our intersubjective social interaction, and some of it I think is innate. So to the extent that it's social, a role can, I guess, influence your experience of your identity. So I had another thought on what a role is, but I forgot it. I think I'm gonna Dolbez, I'm gonna send you the link, and then you can come on and help me figure out what roles are. Let me find you. Okay, I'm gonna send it on Discord. And I do have to be off of here by noon, or about 5 minutes to noon, because I have another Zoom coming up. Okay, so I forgot where I was going with this. What was the question? How do they shape our identities and behaviors? So I gave the example of how that being in that one role of moderator was starting to shape my behavior, certainly, and my thinking around my behavior. And I don't know necessarily my identity. I wasn't in it long enough to develop an identity of it. Although I've been in moderator roles before, I've been organizers of groups. I've had my own groups that I've started, and I never like to be seen as the leader. To me, they're like co-creative collaborations between me and the members. I'm help to facilitate the existence of the group. I'm the organizer. When I was a meetup organizer, I used to call myself the webmaster. I kept the website going, but I didn't necessarily want people to see me as a leader or somebody with authority, or although you need a certain amount of authority to maintain any kind of group. Or I didn't want to be seen as the decision maker. I wanted people to I wanted all of us to collaborate on shaping the community, or I wanted people to empower people to run with their own ideas of the community. Okay, Dolbez is coming on. Or I guess Philip is the digital age. I'm kind of glad he's on because my voice is really straining today. I noticed it yesterday on the Zoom too. I don't know what it means.
Okay, is the mic working?
I can hear you. Yes.
Good. Then it's time to see if the camera works. We've had the first time it didn't work at first, but the second time we talked did. So 50-50.
Are you on your phone, the camo?
Yeah, the app thing. Because the webcam I have that's integrated into my computer, it's crap. It's like I have to have at least something of quality. Oh,
Yeah, mine is too. I found out my camera is only 720p. So even if I found something to stream in 180p, my camera wouldn't support it.
I think mine's, well, Camo can only stream 1080p, but I think my camera can record in 4K.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not sure if I can watch in 4K on my phone. So that would be kind of funny, you know. But
yeah, I may have to look into the phone because I think the phone does 1080p. My problem is you had that little gadget that held your phone in place.
Yeah, a little thing.
Yeah, I would need to get one of those because I have a hard time stabilizing the phone.
Oh God, why did I do this? I used this when talking to some friends like last week, so I messed with the settings. So now the camera is upside down.
Oh.
Wait, to 0. There, that should work. And you see me. And I haven't started the camera, of course, yet because I'm
okay.
Okay, or is it better that way? Depends on. That seems to be fine. Yeah, that's probably fine. And then Start video. That's the
Oh,
correct one,
look at there.
right?
Yeah, there
Yes.
you are. That's 1080.
Well, not no. Now it's 720 because it takes a lot of battery
That's
to
only
stream.
720. Man, it
Wait,
looks
no,
good.
actually, this is 1080. What am
Okay,
I?
it
Yeah,
looked
I'm I'm not a professional at this.
it looked highly defined. A cup of tea. So I was the topic of social roles came up recently, so I was trying to kind of give my perspective on it, especially as somebody that's not really proficient in social roles. So that's kind of where the chat was going. If you
yeah,
had any thoughts, like from your personal experience or even your studies on, I touched on Erickson a little bit
yeah.
and role
Well,
confusion.
what mm, I liked your explanation though of the when you talked of the two identities. We have one internal and one external. So, like, would you consider that maybe you could say that the goal or like the ultimate sign of maturity is when both your kind of external view of yourself and your internal view, so who you are believed to be and who you are, when those are completely integrated? Could that be said that that is like true maturity or true achievement almost?
I think it could be said by um, a Dabrowskian like I am. I don't know that it would be said by. There's the concept of like adjustment or assimilation to social norms, which are externally defined. And some people would call that maturity, to the
Mm-hmm.
extent to which you can compromise or suppress your internal self to external norms. But I think Dabrowski would say more what you said is discovering your own authentic norms and then actualizing those externally and in the hopes that some community or people that are aligned with those values would you would find some way to adjust to that environment, but not necessarily the larger social environment if your norms are not aligned with theirs. And I think he would call that a form of achievement.
It is kind of similar actually to I haven't read that much into Jung, but like the idea of, the persona and then the true self, and like when the goal of individuation is when like those are the same. There is no separation between who you pretend to be or who you seem to be to who you actually are.
Yes, and the persona I think is what forms as you interact, as you start to have interactive experiences with other humans.
Yeah.
And it like I'm not really conscious of my persona. I feel like I'm pretty authentic and I try to be who I feel like I am. But I am discovering in little small ways that with certain people, I'm kind of this way. With other people, I'm kind of this way. So that's kind of some element of a persona, even though I'm not consciously of adopting a specific mask when I'm interacting.
Yeah.
I am kind
Well,
of adjusting to individual people.
yeah. Mask. That is a good word. That reminded me of a sociologist. Something with G. I don't remember this. Goffman, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah,
Irving
Goffman.
Goffman. I have his.
Yeah,
Someone just gave me his book to read and
yeah,
told
yeah,
me it
yeah.
would help me, and
Him,
I haven't
him,
read it.
like, humans are just a collection of masks and all that. And I think he touches upon something that I would say is a pretty true statement, that a lot of who we are is how we interact in different settings, but also from anecdotal experience. Like I of course have a lot of masks. Like I behave a bit differently in different groups, but I majorly currently only have kind of I am myself with some modifications. But a few years ago, like in middle school or before, like I was, you could say, three separate people basically, like three separate masks. One with my family.
Consciously or just instinctively, they just emerge.
That is a good question. I think mostly instinctually, because I had like one basically a mask in school, and then one at home, and then one online with friends online, and that was a very, I would say, almost revealing when I've actually thought upon that, because like I think it has influenced a lot of how I think, which, for example, I was for some reason a lot more open online than I was physically. So
Was it
like
an anonymous persona online?
originally, yes, that was like Dolbez, that was originally anonymous, but I got some good friends and I'm like heavily integrated into a friend group online. So like it's not random people anymore. Like it is actual friends. So it gradually went from like anonymous to slightly more information to, well, we're actually like proper friends now. Uh, and that mask slowly disappeared. But at the same time, like all my other masks, basically, mask or mask, I can't mask.
Well, in America, I think it's masks, but
uh,
European might be mask.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying it stupidly, but those slowly disappeared. So like, I well, actually, I wouldn't say disappeared. Maybe they gradually weakened until all that was left was basically my actual self. Like I would say I'm pretty similar now. Again, like of course slight modifications, but I wouldn't say there are a whole mask that I place on top of myself in social groups. So I think like what I wanted to say with all this is that I think there is some deep truth to Goffman that we are a lot of masks, but also that there is some authentic self, because that's a constant debate, is are we like just a bunch of different personas? Is there a true self? Is there not a true self? And I like anecdotally from my experience, and I know you shouldn't use anecdotes in science or whatever, like anecdotally, it seems to me that both are kind of true in that there you have different masks, but you also have an authentic self. Like they're not opposites. They don't go against each other. Like they integrate really well. And I would probably say that the masks are basically reflections of one part of your true self. Maybe I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well, that was
it's
going to be my question. What is the relationship between
mhm.
any given mask and the true self? Do they emerge or reflect some aspect of your true self, or are they in tension with your actual true self?
I think that actually depends on if it's like you could say the creation of the mask, if that is externally motivated or internally. So we can tie that into like status and hierarchy and roles, because I would say that is an external motivation to create a mask.
If
Mask,
if you're adopting it to adjust to
yeah.
a
Like I would
specific
say,
status, somebody
yeah.
with specific
Then I
status.
don't think it necessarily reflects a true part of yourself. Maybe over time, either you adapt to the mask or the role, or the mask adapts to you and then it reflects, but I don't think it necessarily reflects a part of yourself if you adopt it for external reasons, a role basically. But I think if there's an internal motivation, like me anecdotally, like I adopted those masks because, well, I'm not really sure why, but I know it wasn't that motivated by the outside. Like it was my internal thought process that guided me, like, oh, I need to be more open or more closed away or whatever. Like,
And according to Erickson, that would be completely normal at that
yeah,
stage anyway. When you had your three masks, who were you? Were Who was Philip?
I, you know, I remember having a conversation like that actually earlier this year when we learned about Goffman, because I have these kind of conversations all the time. It's like I can just look back and see what I thought at that time, and I still agree with it. And that was that at with those three major masks, the true me, that was basically the intersection of those. Like what is in common? Like what is it that is in every one of them? Like I am always a core part of myself in each mask. But like what is different, that may, I wouldn't say is inherently in me, at least not to the same extent that what is in common between all is.
So you had Philip. You had an awareness of yourself before junior high, and then you get to junior high, and you have a good point about online too, because when we talk about masking, and interacting with avatars and anonymous personas. That's a very obvious form of masking. So you had several masks after that, and then you integrated or outgrew or something. Did your sense of self, like yourself doesn't seem, it seems diffuse and not localized to one central point, and it seems to change. Like were you different after junior high than before as a result of these different masks?
Well, I was, of course, different, but well, again, I've thought about this and talked about this, but the boundary for when I consider like I am myself now, like there is a point if I go back in childhood, like before this, like I know technically it's me, but it doesn't feel like this was truly me. And like that is not exactly who I am now. I can't really see the direct lineage, you could say. And I set that boundary at like elementary school. When I end elementary school and enter junior high or middle school, as it's called in Norway, that was when I kind of became myself. So I always knew, well, I at that from that point, my perception of who I am currently is kind of the same, although very different, but it is still me. But the masks definitely like made me very different then than from what I am now, but not too different. But because like if you combine all the three masks, I think that could be a good approximation of who I am now. Like it was, you could almost say in actually you could say it's an exploration of that part of myself, and then a reintegration after like middle school or junior high. Uh, and like there were multiple motivations like in online. I don't know why, but I was just more open. So there is definitely a motivation there for being more open, but I don't necessarily understand why. And at home, that was like, just the family, everyone is different with family, at least during the teens, I would say. But in school, like I definitely know why I basically crafted a mask there. And that is like the first day of school, like I knew, oh, there are bullies here. So like my strategy was to kind of tone down some parts of myself and extend like increase some others. And the end result was I befriended the bullies, like to a certain extent. So I was never bullied. Like I avoided that. And I think that that part was the part I never really had thought about or explored. But now, like that ability to just, integrate in any crowd and not like if I want to not really disturb a crowd and like go with the flow, even though that's kind of not what I want to do. But the ability to do that, that was something I
Did it
didn't
come
really know
naturally?
I had.
Did it come
Huh?
naturally?
Yeah, it comes naturally to
So
just
the bullies that could be a form of status. So would you say you were adopting a particular persona to integrate in response to, like, you picked up somehow, you had some perception that there was a threat, or I don't
yeah.
want to say power differential, but there's definitely a threat to you.
I well, your first question, like what, like my adoption of persona, I at that time I didn't really know. Like I couldn't explain it at that time. I just knew I became this and this. But in like later years, like now, when I look back, the best explanation I would say is that I adopted a kind of stoic mindset, and that kind of gave me a respect. Like I am in control of myself, and I feel that is that is what bullies look for, people who can't really control themselves. It doesn't matter what trait they have or who they are, like it is control of yourself. And if you are in control of yourself, or at least you seem to be in control of yourself, then that gives off the perception of power. Like we could tie that into the lobsters of Peterson, when they straighten up, they look their back, they are in control, they're not hunched over, their body is healthy, they're good and fine. Like that is a projection of status. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have status. With humans too, we project status, but that projection is all it took, at least for me, to dodge the bullet of bullying.
So there was kind of a continuity between yourself now and the self that entered middle school, where you said you kind of became aware of who you are. Was there a specific event or rite of passage, or was it just the transition from elementary to middle school and encountering the bullies? Was that enough to establish that sense of identity from that point on?
Mm, I no, I don't think there was a specific event. I think it was more a process that took like okay, like 80% I would say of the process like happened in the first year, and then the rest like happened over the last 2 years. And I think like the start was definitely when I like, oh, bullies, I need to dodge that. And the end, that was when I met my online friend and got into that community. So I think you could draw a general timeline that this is the period where I, you know, became shaped into who I am now. But I don't think there's a specific event that like this is the beginning and this is the end, like just generally outlines, you know?
So potentially and likely, it's a process that will continue as
Yeah.
you move through other phases of life and have other experiences.
Yeah. I have noticed a lot of change in me even after like middle school, but I don't think I will change to the same extent that I did in middle school, because that was like a total shift in off when it was completed. Like I went from being a very closed off introvert, like in elementary school. Like okay,
Oh,
of course, I was super open with my friends, super open. Like I was definitely a weirdo with my friends and at home, but like in the class and with other people who weren't my friends, not necessarily like bad people, just people I didn't know, you know, or didn't talk to. With them, I was like super closed off, and that shell had to like I think that is the biggest thing that changed, and that was because of my developing an almost stoic personality or persona due to the bullies that I had to like maybe I realized, maybe I didn't, but it happened nonetheless that I had to break that shell. Like I couldn't be so closed off. So I was very open, but I was in control of what I was sharing. So I could kind of shape the image I projected. And all of this, like I didn't think this consciously.
mhm.
Like I'm just recollecting, back on the times, like what I did on instinct or on intuitions. And that is like to instead of like being super closed off, I became very open. And now I'm just more in control of actually what I'm open about, but I'm generally much more open. So I kind of flipped from introvert to extrovert by the common definition. Of course, I know the more psychological definition, but the common definition, I flipped. Is that
Were there bullies in elementary school, or you were just naturally introverted?
well, there were definitely bullies, but I don't think I had ever encountered one in like of course there's always bullies at any school, but I don't think I had ever encountered anyone in elementary school. Like I was elementary school, I was left to myself. Like I did my school, I loved work, not work, I loved thinking, and I loved I, I loved that part of school, not the work and homework, but I loved the thinking. It's like I was left to my own and fighting with sticks and screaming out and being the weird kid, I was allowed to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, you have me thinking of my own experience with bullies as well, and it was kind of the same way. I didn't consciously. I was more extroverted. We had ended up moving schools, so at my first school, I was actually kind of the bully. I was extroverted. I was kind of a leader on the playground, and in my town, you went first. It was like kindergarten through third grade at one school, and then fourth through 12th grade was at a different school. So when you got to fourth grade, you were like at school with the big kids, and you shared the playground with the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, like the middle schoolers. And I remember I would harass the eighth graders. I was constantly chasing them and harassing them and picking on them. And they would run to the office and they'd be like, make this kid leave us alone. Like, it's this little fourth grader and he's chasing us around the playground and won't leave us alone. And so I was kind of none of it was conscious, but I think back then I wanted, because I was the new kid in that environment, I wanted to show them that this was my territory,
Mm.
not theirs, that I was claiming that I think there was probably some primitive, and this is a primate reason for it. But then we moved to that other town, and I became in your situation where I became very introverted, and I adopted a. That's when I became the weird kid, actually. And I didn't talk to anyone. I carried around a book. I refused to speak. I was kind of mute. I stared at people if they tried to talk to me. I kept to myself. I dressed in black, all that stuff. And then, but eventually I learned to stand up to the bullies. And when I got to high school and they tried to bully me, I stood up to them and they respected me after that. And then they kind of took me under their wing and protected me.
Yeah. They you showed that you were actually in control of yourself. And
I was
I
tired of it, and
yeah.
I didn't want to start high school on the same foot that I had started junior high school on. And so the very first, because they had this tradition where the seniors, they call it ringing, and they take their class rings and they find the freshmen and they kind of give them noogies with the ring. So they had warned us ahead of time that when you get to high school, they're going to try to ring you. So the first day of school, I went in kind of knowing that the potential to get ringed was out there. And I was at lunch one day sitting on a bench with a book, and one of the football players came and sat next to me, and he's like, "Hey buddy, what you doing?" And I could see him playing with his ring, and I told him, I said, "If you touch me with that ring, we're gonna have problems." And he's like, "Whoa man, what, what's," I said, "If you touch me with that ring, both of us are going to be at that office and we're going to have a problem." And after that, he completely changed his approach. And he's like, "Look, man, what's your name? I'm so and so." And he was one of the big football stars. And I introduced, he asked me what I was reading. We chatted a bit. And then after that, he went up telling everybody how cool I was. And like in PE, when the kids would pick on me, he would say, "Oh, no, man, that's Jeff. He's cool. Like, leave him alone." And they would listen to him. They would stop picking on me. So I think that act of standing up to him that day during lunch gained his respect, and then through his respect, I was able to gain the respect of the other kids at high school. And these were the older kids, the upperclassmen, which I didn't have in junior high school. So once I learned how to gain the respect of the kind of upper class kids or upper grade kids, like the football stars, football players, the rodeo team, which was big then, those are the people that kind of started to protect me. And I didn't have to do this introverted weird kid persona anymore. So yeah, I'm thinking exactly what you're saying, that I didn't, none of it was conscious. I'm not consciously aware of roles like as much as you were, but I was doing the same process. I was just doing it intuitively and instinctively and kind of ad hoc, creatively in the moment as I encountered the challenges. But I wasn't thinking in terms of roles or status. I didn't know that they were necessarily bullies, or they saw me as a different status, or that I was seeing them as a different status. But it seems like there was a similar process of development there. I can
Yeah.
definitely trace differences between elementary school, junior high, and then high school. And then when I went to the gifted school, that was a completely different environment, and I was a completely different person at that school because I could be myself. I wasn't a threat. I think I was a target, not because I was vulnerable, because I was threatening, like I was an outsider.
Yeah. You were
And
a
you,
danger.
yeah. And at the gifted school where I could be myself, that's I think the moment where I was more myself. That was like your junior high experience. When I went to the gifted school, I got to really discover who I was because I was around people that could reflect those parts of me. And that's the part where I think I discovered my, what would you call it? Like the identity that kind of follows you the rest of your life.
You know, maybe it's cliche, but like your core, like that is that it fits though. It is the true essence of yourself. Like things around it, it can change and be different, but that is like the most essential part of yourself that will stick. And I don't know, you could call it the true self, the authentic self, the core, the inner self, a lot of
Because there's
self.
also the deep self, which is the part of us that we're not even aware that we are. But it's the part that I can't imagine myself today without that part. Like without that experience, it became so naturalized to me that I would have no sense of who I was from that point forward without that experience. Like if that experience did not happen, I'd be a completely different person today, and I can't even imagine what that person would be like. That's how essential
Hmm.
whatever identity developed then is to who I am today. So if you want to call it core or like foundational or cornerstone identity, that would be it.
Yeah. And that made me think about like events that you kind of like, of course, you go through it and you follow unfocused. You follow your intuitions and whatever, and but after the fact, like you look back and realize that this was such a fundamental moment in my journey that like if something changed at this one moment or this well time, these 3 months, I would be completely different. And I would say that it is those moments that are most important, but it's like modern society, if we tie it in to that, kind of doesn't emphasize as much oh, the
Yeah, you keep
the
going in and out.
yeah. I'm not doing anything.
Oh,
It's
it's doing it
just
on
the
its own. Oh, I thought you were playing with a button.
no. I'm not. I my hands are up in there.
Ooh,
I'm
spooky.
not touching anything.
Your identity is changing before our eyes.
Yeah. Where was I? Oh yeah, modern society. Like I think it isn't emphasized enough how the process of finding yourself or becoming yourself, like, yes, you could look at it as a gradual journey, but I think you're missing a big point in that journey, like where that road goes, like that road will be there because, life is a road forwards, you can't avoid that. But
The arrow of
the way
time.
the road, furls and goes, that 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 is, I would say, because of certain moments or very important moments. And at least I've found a lot of people are not prepared for those. Like maybe that's, maybe bad upbringing or good upbringing, too good. Like I don't know why, but I think that like our society clearly lacks, at least in my generation, I don't know about yours, but clearly lacks something that they had previously, or humanity or our society had previously, that kind of basically like everyone understood that you have to perform at certain moments. You can't succumb to your anxiety, or well, actually, maybe you could define it as just we have a weakened ability now, at least my generation, of tackling like true stress and anxiety. And instead of actually handling the situation, oh, there's bullies. What do I do? Like, I have to do something. Instead of like actually doing something, you kind of, go inwards, you collapse, you try to go away from the problem. And I've seen that happen to that some people seem to just they just know that they have to act, and so they act, whilst other people they freeze up, even though like everything screams that you have to do something, but they still freeze up. And I think the percentage or the amount of people who do freeze instead of act when you have to, I think that is rising. And I think maybe something we do in modern society is wrong. And we were talking about this is mental health month, so I'm trying to like drag it into
Yeah, that's
actual.
interesting to me because I always just assumed that was innate. But if the numbers are changing, that does point to some kind of societal factor. And I was also thinking, like, we both had positive developmental experiences where we were able to establish a positive identity in the face of adversity.
Yeah.
But I imagine that there are some people that have really negative or traumatic experiences that they're not able to develop any positive outcome from, and that trauma probably follows them through their life and affects their mental health in a way that we were able to transcend.
Yeah. Although, well, I think it is prudent to drag in well, I don't know if it's a quote from Peterson or not, but I heard it from him, and I don't remember it correctly, so I'm paraphrasing slightly. But the best road to walk is one on the line between order and chaos. Order, the known, chaos, the unknown. Like,
Oh, I love that. As a
yeah,
Discordian, I really like that one.
yeah, and I think that in like usually people when they think of you can't handle anxiety or stress, like legitimately they think of too much chaos. They have no idea, like been in traumatic experience in war zone, a extreme weather, whatever, like a catastrophe, a crisis. And yes, that is a valid reason, but I don't think that is the thing that's increasing. Like, this is the safest time in human history. Well, maybe that was a few decades ago or whatever, but like this general period is the safest time in human history. So I don't think it's valid to think that the reason that mental health problems are increasing, like the amount of them or the vulnerability per person is increasing, I don't think the reason for that can be said to be an abundance of chaos, an abundance of the unknown, of crisis. I think it's rather opposite, that because we have it so safe, we have forgotten that humans are kind of made to grow up in an environment where you evolve through challenge. You walk that line between the safe and the not safe, and because like one foot in the safe, one foot on the unsafe, and that is what develops you. Like our experience, we well we live in this society that's generally safe. Like there's no potential of you dying. So like we still have that order, but we also like had our challenges, the chaos, we don't know how to act. So we just have to do something. And then we solve it by walking that line between. And I think uh in our day and age, like there is a leaning towards like everything being too safe, to the extent that people don't really develop the systems necessary for dealing with challenges, dealing with stress, anxiety. And
That is one of the theories out there. I know we grew up with a lot more risk, just growing up in the country and playing outside. I'm going to have to end it because I have another Zoom, but let me leave it here and we can think about this question. Perhaps there's something in your experience, in my experience, before the point, let's say before junior high, in our childhood, the way we were raised, perhaps, that's making a difference. So we can examine that another time. I'd love to continue this conversation. I feel
yeah,
like we're
me
just
too.
getting started.
Me too.
But maybe if it's not innate, which it could be innate, we just could be a certain type of people. But if it's not that, or in addition to that, perhaps there are experiences in our early childhood or prior to adolescence that
Yeah.
made the difference in how
You know,
we approached adolescent crises.
as an ending sentence, then I would drag out something I've realized that is kind of my personal philosophy. Like in so many topics, my answer tends to be this, is that what is innate, you could say, is maybe the foundation or the building blocks. But then like it is our upbringing that uses those blocks or builds on the foundation. So like everyone has the capability, the foundation, but it's our upbringing that changes it. So I
Well, I'm
don't
thinking
think it's a
you said one time that biology sets the
yeah,
parameters.
that is
So
that
it would be
same
maybe our
idea.
parameters are different, but if not, something happened environmentally within those parameters that were set by nature. So
Yeah,
it was good talking. I'm glad you good to see you, and
I'm just fixing with the focus. That's why I'm holding my hands up, trying to fix it. But yeah.
I appreciate it. And we'll do it again soon.
Oh yeah,
Sorry I have to
definitely.
run.
Like I'm becoming your most frequent guest.
You are. I very much appreciate like that. So
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. It was a pleasure being on, and hopefully we can have a further conversation some other time.
I'm watching Fight Club on Saturday after
Mhm.
Paul's show, so you can join us for that too.
I am. Is that Saturday? Yeah, that's my brother's birthday, I think. So I
Ah,
I don't think I can. Well, actually,
well,
that doesn't take the entire day. But that also
there'll be other.
depends on.
We'll do other things.
Yeah,
So I'll see you at some point.
yeah. We'll see. Maybe I can join. Maybe not. That is. Yeah, we'll see. But goodbye.